You pour your whole grain cereal, maybe add a little fruit, thinking you're making a healthy choice. Every morning, that bowl could be hitting your bloodstream exactly like a dessert. For anyone managing high blood pressure, diabetes, or someone on heart medication, what I'm about to show you matters more than your doctor probably explained. We're going to walk through how the whole grain promise hides a dessert-level sugar hit, what that does inside your body, how the system allowed this to happen, and what you can actually eat instead. Consider those big-name heart-healthy cereals sitting at eye level in every supermarket breakfast aisle. The ones covered in whole grain stamps, heart symbols, and promises about fiber and vitamins. Researchers at the University of Toronto published something back in 1981 that measured exactly how fast different foods raise your blood sugar, testing 62 common foods to create what we now call the glycemic index. What they found should have changed everything. Cornflakes scored between 81 and 84. Rice Krispies came in at 82 to 87, and Cheerios landed at 74. Table sugar, the stuff you'd never dump into a bowl in cold breakfast, scores just 65. Chocolate cake comes in at 38. Your whole grain breakfast cereal spikes your blood sugar faster than eating sugar straight from the bag, and harder than eating chocolate cake for breakfast. This isn't fringe science or some internet theory. This is peer-reviewed research that's been sitting in medical journals for more than 40 years. The breakfast cereal industry operates at a $41 to $47 billion global market, with the United States alone accounting for 12 to 14 billion of that. The entire foundation of what that market for the past 20 years has been built on a single word: whole grain. So let's think back for a moment. Growing up in the 40s, 50s, or 60s, and breakfast looked completely different. Starting with porridge you cooked on the stove, some eggs, and toast from bread, actually baked, or at least bread without 20 ingredients. Simple food, real food. Walk into any grocery store today, and the breakfast aisle stretches like a wall of boxes, screaming about whole grain, heart healthy, cholesterol management, vitamins, and fiber. Products like Cheerios, Honey Nut Cheerios, Frosted Mint Wheats, and Raisin Bran all promise you making a smart choice for your heart. General Mills made a big announcement in September of 2004, declaring they would convert all 29 of their Big G cereals to whole grain. Trix, Golden Grams, Lucky Charms, Rice Chex, every single box would get the treatment. By January of 2005, the conversion was done, adding roughly 1.5 billion servings of whole grain per year to the American diet, which works out to 27 million servings every single day. What they didn't do was significantly reduce the sugar. The food changed, not you. What appears on the box became more profitable than what goes inside it, and the story they told became worth more than the food itself. Michael Pollan, who wrote in Defense of Food, describes it perfectly when he said, "It's easier to slap a health claim on a box of sugary cereal than on a potato or a carrot," with the bizarre result that the healthiest foods in the supermarket sit quietly in the produce section, silent as a stroke victim, while a few hours over, the Cocoa Puffs and Lucky Charms scream about their newfound whole grain goodness. Pollan also pointed out something else worth understanding. Making money by selling your oatmeal is nearly impossible when you can walk into a store and buy a pound of plain oats for 79 cents. But the companies make their profit by turning those oats into breakfast cereal. Whole oats cost 79 cents. Turn them into a branded cereal box covered in health claims, and suddenly you're paying $5 or $6. The grain itself doesn't create the profit, the processing and the marketing does. Pick up any major cereal box and look at the front. Phrases like whole grain, helps lower cholesterol, 9 essential vitamins and minerals cover the package, maybe with a little heart symbol, probably with a stamp from something called the Whole Grains Council, showing how many grams of whole grain sit inside. Let me explain what those promises actually mean. Whole grain claims rest on the FDA definition from February of 2006, stating that the whole grain cereals must contain the bran, germ, and endosperm in the same proportions as they exist in the intact grain. Sounds reasonable until you read the fine print. which explicitly allows grinding, cracking, flaking, and other heavy processing. Companies can blast grain through industrial extrusion equipment at 200 degrees Celsius under 200 bars of pressure and still call it whole grain. A 2024 study measured exactly what that processing does. When corn goes through the extrusion, rapidly digestible starch increases by 53%, wheat goes up by 48%, while rice climbs 40%. At the same time, slowly digestible starch, the kind that's actually good for your blood sugar, decreases by roughly 95%. The fiber claim falls apart under examination too. Multiple studies going back to that original 1981 research found no significant relationship between fiber content and blood sugar response when dealing with processed cereals. And adding wheat bran to an extruded cereal product doesn't meaningfully change how it affects your blood sugar. Those vitamin claims, almost all of them come from fortification, where processing strips out nutrients and then manufacturers add synthetic vitamins back in so they can print health claims on the box. Let me show you specific numbers. Kellogg's Raisin Bran contains 17 grams of sugar in 1 cup, nearly twice what you'd get from a Krispy Kreme glazed donut, which has 10 grams. Honey Nut Cheerios packs 12 grams of sugar per serving, the same amount you'll find in Frosted Mini Wheats, Cinnamon Toast Crunch, and nearly as much as the 11 grams in Lucky Charms. Every single one beats a donut for sugar content. These aren't isolated examples. The Environmental Working Group analyzed around 1,500 cereals back in 2014 and discovered that 93% of cold cereals contain added sugars, while only 18% qualified as low sugar by their criteria. Inside your bloodstream, these products behave much closer to dessert than the old-fashioned cereals people grew up with decades ago. The whole grain label tells you about the ingredient list, not about what the food actually does inside your body. Let me walk you through what happens every morning you eat the stuff. When a bowl of high glycemic cereal goes down, your blood sugar shoots up fast, really fast, spiking within 30 to 60 minutes. Your pancreas responds by dumping insulin into your bloodstream. Bring that sugar back down. But when you're eating cereal with a glycemic index in the 70s or 80s, that insulin response often comes on too strong. Blood sugar doesn't just come back down, it crashes. 3 to 5 hours after breakfast, you'll feel shaky, tired, foggy, and hungry. Again, you reach for a snack, usually something sweet, and the whole cycle starts over. A 1999 study looked at this pattern specifically by giving teenage boys meals with different glycemic indexes and watching what happened next. After the high glycemic meal, which in this case was instant oatmeal, the boys voluntarily ate 81% more calories later in the day compared to when they had a low glycemic meal. That works out to about 700 extra calories driven entirely by the blood sugar crash. Now consider what this does to your heart and circulation over time. When blood sugar spikes repeatedly, day after day, year after year, it creates stress on your blood vessels. Sugar in your bloodstream can damage the delicate lining in your arteries, and your body responds with inflammation. That contributes to stiffening and narrowing of arteries, the kind that leads to high blood pressure and heart disease. Managing cardiovascular issues becomes harder when these repeated spikes force your medication to work overtime and make your condition more difficult to control. Your brain runs on glucose, but it needs a steady supply, not a roller coaster. When blood sugar swings wildly from breakfast, your brain struggles to keep up. That brain fog you feel mid-morning, the irritability, the trouble focusing, you might just be aging, but it might also be your breakfast. The same goes for your peripheral nerves, the ones in your hands and feet that are sensitive to blood sugar swings. Numbness, tingling, or pain in your extremities gets worse when blood sugar stays unstable. Inflammation shows up throughout your whole body too. You might wake up feeling stiff, with your joints that ache, fingers that look a little swollen, a general puffy feeling. These are signs of systemic inflammation, and highly processed, high-sugar breakfast foods feed that fire every single morning. This isn't about one bad day. This is about what happens when your body deals with this pattern for decades. So how did sugars that spike blood sugar faster than sugar itself end up marketed as heart-healthy whole grain foods? The answer comes down to regulatory loopholes and the industry marketing working together for 20 years. Let's start with the definition itself. Back in February of 2006, the FDA published draft guidance on whole grain label statements. And that guidance, which remains just a draft, never finalized, even here in 2026, allows manufacturers to grind, crack, flake, and extrude grains that still call them whole grains, as long as the bran, germ, and endosperm stay present as in the original proportions. Physical structure doesn't matter under this definition. Only composition matters. But the science says physical structure is everything. David Jenkins, that same researcher from 1981's study, published a follow-up study in 1988, showing that bread made from whole grain flour had a glycemic index barely different from white bread, while bread containing intact or cracked kernels had a significantly lowered glycemic index. The physical structure of the grain, not its composition, determines how it affects your blood sugar. The FDA definition tracks composition but completely ignores structure, and that's the loophole. Health claims entered the picture in July of 1999, when the FDA authorized cereals to say that diets rich in whole grain foods and other plant foods and low in saturated fat and cholesterol may help reduce the risk of heart disease. And cereals with at least 51% whole grain by weight could make that claim. 2005 brought the Whole Grains Council and industry-funded organizations with more than 100 grain company members, including General Mills, Kellogg's, Kraft, and Pepperidge Farm. They created the whole grain stamp, that little yellow symbol you see on boxers, where products need just 8 grams of whole grain per serving to get the basic stamp. Products can have more refined grains than whole grain and still qualify. By 2003, the whole grain stamp appeared on 12,500 products in 65 countries. Ad campaigns, dietary guidelines, even some health professionals repeated the cereal industry's message. Whole grains are heart healthy. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Cereal is a smart choice. That phrase about breakfast being the most important meal tracks back to a 1917 article in Good Health magazine, edited by John Harvey Kellogg himself, the man who founded Kellogg's cereal. Look back at those specific cereals we talked about earlier. Cheerios, Honey Nut Cheerios, Frosted Mini Wheats, Raisin Bran. These products perfectly demonstrate how the rules allow this kind of packaging. Since they are all whole grain, they all carry health claims, and they all have the blood sugar impact we've been discussing. This isn't one bad box. This is how the business works. The regulatory agencies eventually took notice. In 2009, the FDA sent General Mills a warning letter, saying that Cheerios had been marketed as an unapproved drug because of claims like clinically proven to lower cholesterol. That same year, Kellogg settled with the FTC over the claims that Frosted Mini Wheats improved kids' attentiveness by nearly 20%, when the real number was about 11%, and only for roughly half the kids. 2010 brought Kellogg's destruction of 2 million units of Rice Krispies packaging after claims the cereal helps support your child's immunity. Between 2016 and 2021, Kellogg's paid out $13 million to settle a class action lawsuit alleging that deceptively marketing Raisin Bran, Frosted Mini Wheats, and other cereals as heart healthy when they contain 18 to 40% added sugars. Post Foods paid $15 million around the same time for similar claims about Raisin Bran and Honey Bunches of Oats. Then, in December of 2024, the FDA finally updated its definition of healthy. For the first time since 1994, under the new rule, cereals must contain at least 3/4 of an ounce of whole grains and no more than 2.5 grams of added sugar per serving to use the word healthy on its packaging. The Consumer Brands Association tested the new criteria on 104 cereals. 3 qualified. 3 out of 104. That means 97% of the cereals currently sitting on supermarket shelves, many of them carrying whole grain stamps and heart-healthy claims, cannot legally be called healthy under the FDA's own updated definition. This is systematic. This is not an accident. So what do you actually do about this? Let me give you 3 simple rules for evaluating any box cereal or breakfast food. First rule: when sugar appears in the first 3 ingredients, you're eating dessert. Period. What the front of the box says about whole grains or fiber doesn't matter. Look at the ingredient list, and if sugar, corn syrup, honey, or any sweetener lands in the top 3, you're having dessert for breakfast. Second rule: check the actual sugar number on the nutrition label. Anything more than 5 grams per serving deserves caution, and anything more than 10 grams puts you in the donut category. Rule 3: compare the fiber to the sugar. When the sugar comes in higher than the fiber, by more than double, that's your red flag. Real whole grain foods that haven't been processed to death tend to have fiber numbers that land at least in the same ballpark as sugar numbers. Now let me offer you some alternatives that don't require overhauling your entire life. Steel-cut oats or rolled oats that you actually cook in stove have a glycemic index between 52 and 61, landing in the low to medium range. You're looking at a real, minimally processed grain, and adding a little fruit or maybe some nuts gives you a breakfast that doesn't spike your blood sugar. Plain shredded wheat, the kind with 0 grams of sugar, works as another option. Grape nuts have 5 grams of sugar and 7 grams of fiber per serving. Not perfect, but dramatically better than most of what sits on the shelf. Eggs work. Plain yogurt with fruit works. Even a piece of whole grain toast with peanut butter, real peanut butter, made from just peanuts and salt, gives you protein, fat, and fiber to slow down your digestion. If you absolutely refuse to look box cereal, here's what to look for. Find cereals with very short ingredient lists, 5 or 6 ingredients maximum. Find cereals where sugar isn't listed at all, or where it shows up way down at the bottom. Look for fiber content of at least 5 grams per serving, and check the glycemic index if you can find it. Anything under 55 counts as low. But here's what matters most. Start by rethinking the one box you eat the most often. Not your entire kitchen, not every meal, just that one box. Ask yourself whether this is actually helping your body, or whether it's just convenient and familiar. For decades, the cereal industry has counted on you, trusting the front of the box. They've counted on you, not checking the numbers, and they've counted on the assumption that whole grain equals healthy, no matter what they've done to that grain in the factory. The science tells a different story. The glycemic index tells a different story. And your blood sugar meter, if you use one, will tell a different story. A bowl of cornflakes hits your bloodstream harder than eating sugar from the bag. Honey Nut Cheerios has more sugar than a donut, and Raisin Bran has twice as much sugar as a donut. These aren't fringe products nobody's heard of. These are some of the most recognizable, most trusted breakfast brands in America, and they've been allowed to market themselves as wholesome and heart-healthy because of a regulatory system that measures the wrong thing. You deserve better. You still do. Change doesn't have to be extreme. It just has to be informed. Read the back of the box, not just the front. Trust the numbers, not the marketing. Real whole grain food doesn't need a stamp from an industry-funded council to prove it's good for you. It just is. Start with tomorrow's breakfast. One choice, one morning, that's all it takes. Thanks for sticking with me all the way through this one. I know some of what we've covered here might have changed how you look at the cereal sitting in your pantry right now. So here's what I want to know. What's your next move? Are you switching to steel-cut oats tomorrow morning? Tossing that Honey Nut Cheerios and going with eggs? Or maybe you found one of these 3 cereals that actually passed the FDA's new health standard. Drop a comment below and tell me what changes you're making to your breakfast routine, if any. And I'm genuinely curious what you're thinking after watching this. If this video gave you information you didn't have, hit that like button so more people can see it. And if you want to keep digging into how the food industry works, consider subscribing. There's a whole playlist up on your screen right now with more investigations like this one, covering everything from nutrition labels to marketing tricks that have shaped what we eat. Your breakfast matters. Make it count. I'll see you in the next one.